Hello and welcome. Today we will talk about external collaboration with Microsoft 365 groups in Microsoft Teams, Outlook, Yammer, and SharePoint. My name is Salil Kakkar, and I'm a program manager in the Microsoft 365 groups in Yammer team. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Nandini.
Hi everyone, my name is Nandini Bhavasar, and I'm a program manager from the Microsoft 365 groups team.
Our goal with this video is to help you become a champion for external collaboration for your organization. We hope by the end of this video, you will be familiar with all the governance superpowers you have at your disposal and that you're ready to craft a rollout strategy for external collaboration for your organization. So what are we going to do in the next 45 minutes? We're going to power through these 4 key themes. First, we will start with a quick introduction about external collaboration using Microsoft 365 groups, share some emerging trends we are seeing across the industry. Second, we look through the group lifecycle and adoption stages. We'll talk about how do you go from 0 to 1 in setting up external collaboration. Third, we'll deep dive into the best practices to administer and govern guests at scale. Last but not the least, we look at how Microsoft manages guests. This is one of the most frequently asked questions we hear from you all, so we are happy to share the tools and processes we deploy internally. Some housekeeping. We will be providing a lot of reference material in the form of URLs throughout this presentation. We encourage you to review these resources and reach out to us for any questions. The way we live and work is changing. People need to collaborate more and more just to get work done. With geographically dispersed teams, a growing fleet of independent workers, and the new work-from-home reality that many of us face, collaboration is no longer limited to the 4 walls of your organization. We see more and more organizations use technology to bridge the physical distance between workers. This is where external collaboration comes in. Microsoft 365 Suite, including the core communication apps, give you a secure and compliant model for external collaboration. Now, let's take a look at guests by the numbers. The usage of external collaboration using Microsoft 365 groups is going through the roof. Around the same time last year, we had about 9 million provisioned guests. So we see a 3x growth year on year with a sharp increase in the active guests. The feature has deep penetration across our customer base. 98% of all production tenants have guest access enabled. Fun fact, we have a tenant in Antarctica which uses guest access. So you can imagine how this feature is really helping bring the world closer. This huge uptick we are seeing is due in large part to efforts of people like yourselves who are working super hard at being change agents within your organization. So a big shout out to you all administrators watching this. When it comes to external collaboration, the admins often have to tread a tightrope. On one hand, admins want to empower the end users to seamlessly collaborate with external partners. On the other hand, they must ensure that only the right guests have access to the authorized resources at any point in time. At the heart of this dilemma is the fact that there is an information asymmetry between folks in the organization who use external collaboration and the admins who enforce governance. We receive tremendous feedback from the admin community about how existing governance capabilities make your life easier. We also receive feedback from you that we need to do even more to simplify and automate the guest management across the suite. To address these issues, we now provide some key governance superpowers to admins so they can rely on the system to put the necessary checks and balances in place. They can also empower their employees with additional capabilities so the end users do not need to bother or depend on admins for external collaboration. Now let's take a look at the guest lifecycle and the different adoption stages. If you're just starting out with guest access, you're on what NASA calls an exploratory mission. Your journey starts on the bottom left of this chart. However, the recommended eventual state for all tenants is the one on the top right. Here we have a self-sustaining ecosystem of guests using Microsoft 365 groups with the necessary guardrails of governance and security. The guest lifecycle shown by the wheel on the top right is similar to the lifecycle for other Microsoft 365 constructs like groups. In the coming slides, we'll go over the details for various policies and tools you can use out of the box. Before we deep dive into the best practices for guest governance, here's a quick refresher on Microsoft 365 groups. We often get questions like, what is Microsoft 365 Group and how do they impact external collaboration? The way to think about this is, Groups is the platform layer which powers all the collaboration within the suite. It is the common membership service for both internal and external users that supports the 22 apps in the suite and a growing number of partner applications. What this means for guest governance is that Groups is the fundamental construct with which the admins can manage guest governance. So it doesn't matter if your guests are in Teams, Outlook, Yammer, or SharePoint, you can enforce the same set of governance rules at a Groups level and be confident that this works seamlessly across the apps. You will notice that Yammer is a relatively recent entrant to the list. Over the last 1 year, we made huge investments in bringing the suite-wide parity and innovation to external collaboration in Yammer. We're really excited to announce that the new B2B guest in Yammer is now open for early access customers. So let me kick off the demos by showing you how seamlessly the new B2B guest experience in Yammer looks like.
Let us start by looking at the guest access settings in the inviting tenant, Contoso. We'll go to the Microsoft 365 Admin Center and take a look at the settings for Microsoft 365 groups. From the home page, we navigate to Settings, then Org Settings, and Microsoft 365 Groups. The first option here controls whether the group owners are able to invite guests from outside the organization. The second option determines whether the guest users have access to groups content and resources. Since both of these options are already checked, we are good to go. Let's look at the brand new guest experience in Yammer, where we've made deep investments recently. Megan is a user in Contoso, a tenant where guest access is enabled. Megan owns a community for AI enthusiasts. She wants to invite Alex, who's part of a different organization, to get some advice. All Megan needs to do here is add Alex's email in the member list. This 2-click guest invite process is very similar to how she adds regular members. And presto, the guest is added. Let's look at the guest experience. Alex receives an email notification from Megan. He finds out that he's been invited to a community called AI Enthusiasts from the tenant Contoso. He simply clicks on the link to join. Once inside the community, Alex can access all community resources and collaborate like a regular member. He loves the content and favorites it right away.
To recap, you saw how admins can enable guest access settings for groups. You also saw the new B2B guest experience in Yammer, including the invitation and redemption flow for guests. Now let us look at guest governance. This is a quick checklist of all the concepts you need to know while managing guests using Microsoft 365 groups. These policies form the bedrock of all the guest governance capabilities we provide across the suite. We will cover the highlighted concepts in detail for this session. For the rest, we encourage you to go through the learning resources linked here. As you prepare to enable guest access for your tenant, there are 3 fundamental questions to consider. First, who within your organization can invite guests? Second, who all are eligible to be invited as guests? Third, what content is permissible to be shared with the external users? The admins need to draw a resource boundary, and anything outside this boundary would remain out of reach for the guests. The answers to the above questions might vary based on different factors. For example, the policies and regulations your organization is subject to. For example, these could come from your legal or HR departments. Another factor could be the level of end user awareness about implications of guest access. Once these questions have been answered, you're ready to configure the guest access policies for your tenant. The guest invited role lets admins select which internal users can invite guests. This option is particularly useful for admins who want to run pilot for guest access with a limited set of users first. The way this works is really simple. First, you can create a group and populate its membership with all the users who you'd like to empower to invite guests. Second, you can simply assign a guest invited role to this group. For example, in the early stages of rollout, you might only want the managers in your organization to be able to invite guests. With this policy, you can do that in a jiffy. The domain restrictions give you control over which external organizations can participate in your tenant. For example, you might set up an allow list of domains for seamless collaboration with your partners. Or you might wish to set up a deny list with all the competitors' domain listed, so that no one from the competitor organization ever gets added by mistake. This feature is available through PowerShell and Azure Active Directory portal. For the SharePoint-heavy tenants, in case you have any existing SharePoint domain policies, you can easily migrate them as well. The group-level guest access policy affords you granular control over which assets within your organization can be shared with external guests. For example, if there is a group which houses any trade secrets or proprietary information, but you should never wish to open for guests, you can disable the group-level guest settings so that there is no accidental leaks of any sensitive information. This makes sure that when it comes to guest accessing your organizational data, you're always in the driver's seat. Now let's take a look at these policies in action.
Let's now see how we can leverage domain restrictions to control guest access. For this, go to the External Identities module of the Azure portal and then click on External Collaboration Settings. Here, scroll down to the section of Collaboration Restrictions. There are three options here. With the first one, you'll be allowing invitations to all the domains in the world. So this is the most inclusive option. With the second one, you'll be denying invitation to a specific list of domains. And with the third one, you'll be able to allow invitations only to a specific set of domains. This is the most restrictive one. For the purpose of the demo, let's choose the second option. Imagine a scenario wherein you do not want to allow employees of your competitive organization to have access to any of your resources. In this case, you would choose the option 2 and enter the domain of your competitor. Once done, you'll save it. With this, you have restricted access to all the employees of your competitor organization. Now, let's take an example. We have a SharePoint site here, and somebody from your organization accidentally tries to add the member of your competitor organization. And when they do so, we see that the request fails. So this is how you can control guest access based on domain restrictions. Let's now see how we can control guest access at a group level. Consider the case where you have a team or a group like leadership only. This is a highly confidential team and you want to block all accidental guest additions into this team. You'll be able to do that with the help of a simple PowerShell script. Here, in the first section, I'm retrieving the group ID of the group leadership only. In the second section, I'm setting the Azure AD directory setting template with allow to add guests set to false. And in the last section, I'm just updating the template of the group. Once, when executed, you'll be able to see that allow to add guests of the group leadership only is set to false. Now, if anyone tries to accidentally add a guest into this team, they'll not be able to do so. This is how we block guest access at a group level.
Many of you might be familiar with sensitivity labels in Microsoft 365. These are the unified labels which help you classify and protect your organization's data. Among other things, these labels can be used to regulate which users can create groups that allow for external participation. One common query we get from admins is, with guest access enabled for our tenant, now all the users are creating groups which are enabled for guest access. In some cases, the admins might want to restrict certain users from creating such groups which allow external members. This is where the sensitivity label can be really useful. You can create labels which define the guest access settings as disabled. You can then create a policy to attach the label to a specified set of users. Now you have ensured that this set of users can never create a group which allows for guest access. This option is really useful in the pilot stages for external collaboration. Now let's see a demo on this.
Hi everyone. Let's now see how we can control guest access via sensitivity labels. For this, go to the Microsoft 365 Security Center, scroll down to Classification, and click on Sensitivity Labels. Sensitivity labels are a way to classify email messages, documents, sites, and more. And these labels can be used to protect content or a site based on the settings chosen. Let's see how. For this, let's create a label and name it. And then click on Next. I won't be enabling encryption or content marking for now. Under the site and group settings, you see an option for external users. By checking this, I'll be allowing guest access into the group. By unchecking this, I'll be blocking guest access. Once a label is created and published, you'll be able to leverage these labels to control guest access. Let's understand how. When you're managing a large organization, users might have the need to add guests, but that might not be often. So they're not going to be experts in understanding when they can allow guests and when they cannot. So all you have to do is educate users about these small number of labels and help them pick the right label when they are creating a resource. And you, as an admin, can enforce the right policies from behind the scenes. Let's take an example. I already have two labels created. One of them is called Marketing, where external users are allowed. I have one more label called as Research, where external users are blocked. So you have to tell your users to apply this research sensitivity label whenever they are creating a resource or a group which is related to research and development of your organization. Let's see how they can use it. When one is creating a new group, they'll be able to see this edit button with which they can select the right label. When the user is creating a research resource, say a research group, they can select this research label. Automatically, no guests policy is applied. When they apply the marketing label, guests will be allowed. Similarly, when one is creating a team, the same set of labels will be enabled for users to pick from. By selecting the right label, you'll be able to control guest access. These labels can also be applied to existing teams or groups, and the changes will take effect henceforth. And that's how you can use sensitivity labels to control guest access. Thank you.
Entitlement management is a great way to automate guest management and lifecycle at scale. Imagine a scenario where you have a bunch of guest contractors joining a project for 6 months. You would want all such users to be productive right from day one by giving them access to all the documents and resources they need. You might also want to set up a workflow so that the respective owners of these internal resources can approve such requests. Finally, once the project is over, you want to make sure that the guest access is revoked for the whole bunch. This is where entitlement management does all the heavyweight lifting for you. You can create an access package, which is nothing but a bunch of resources in your tenant. You get a shareable link, which you can share with the guest users. Once the guest users request for access, the request is automatically routed to the specified list of approvers. Once approved, the guest can access all the resources right away. You can also configure the time window for the guest access, post which the access is automatically disabled. Guest access reviews allow for periodic attestation for guests. This ensures that you only have the relevant set of guests in your tenant at any point in time. This takes the burden off the admin's shoulders by creating a self-service model where the owners of the respective resources are on point to validate the guest membership. For example, the admins can set up a guest access review policy which asks the owner of the group to confirm at regular intervals if the guest presence is still needed. If the owner confirms, the guest retains access. Otherwise, the guest access is revoked instantly. Additionally, as admins, you can also define what happens if the owner fails to attest. You can configure the policy to withdraw the guest access by default in such scenarios. Now, let's take a look at these features in action.
Welcome to the demo on entitlement management. Imagine a scenario where you have hired a vendor organization for a project in your company. For faster and effective collaboration and progress on the project, you might want to assign access to certain SharePoint sites or apps of your company to the employees of the vendor organization. Entitlement management lets you do the same in an efficient manner. Let's see how we can leverage this feature. For this, go to the Identity Governance module of the Azure portal of the home tenant, in this case Contoso, and scroll down to Connected Organization. Connected Organization is an external Azure AD directory or a domain that you have a relationship with. Let's add an entry for our vendor organization, in this case Fabricum. And then click on Next. Here, we'll be adding the domain of the Fabricum and add it. In the next section, we'll be selecting the sponsors. I'll add the admin of the home tenant as the internal sponsor. And I'll also add the admin of the Fabricum tenant as the external sponsor. Once done and the details have been reviewed, click on Create to create a new connected organization entry for Fabricum. Now, let's go to the next step of creating an access package. For this, go to the Access Package pane, click on New Access Package, and start entering the details. And click on Next. In this section, I'll be adding all those resources to which I want the Fabricum employees to have access to. Let me add a SharePoint site. Let me then add a team. Let me also add an application, say Salesforce. Select it. I'll also assign the roles for the employees of Fabricum, say visitors to the SharePoint site, member to the team, and say standard user to the Salesforce application, and then click on Next. Since I'm creating this package for external users, I'm going to select this option for users not in your directory, and then go ahead with this option of specific connected organization and select the Fabricum connected organization entry that we just created, and then select. We want every request to be approved by an internal or external sponsor, so I'm going to select this as yes. We want the requester to justify their request, so this is set to yes. We just want one stage of approval, and we want the first approver to be, say, the internal sponsor. I'll also add a fallback as admin of the Fabricum, and if the decision is not made in 14 days, the request will be automatically rejected. We do not want the approver to justify their decision, so I'll set this to no. And we want new requests and assignments of this policy to be enabled, so I'll set this to yes. In the next section, we'll be deciding on the expiration and access review policies. We want the assignment to expire after 365 days, so I'll let this be. We want to enable access reviews, and we want these access reviews to happen biannually, so I'll select that and then click on Next. Once all the details have been reviewed and all the resources to which you want the employees of Fabricum to have access to is in place, let's create the access package. Once the package is created, we just have to pass on this My Access Portal link to the vendor organization. The employees of the vendor organization can then request access to this package with this URL. Now we are in the account of Alex, an employee of Fabricum, and he has received the URL to the access package from his admin. When he opens it, he'll be able to click on this plus button and request for access. He'll enter the business justification, agree to the terms, and click on Submit. With this, Alex has submitted the request to access the access package. Now, back into the account of the admin from Contoso, he sees that Alex from Fabricum has requested permissions to access the resources. He selects the request and clicks on Approve. With this, the admin has approved Alex to access the resources. Back into the account of Alex from Fabricum, we see that he's received an email stating that his request has been approved and he now has access to the package. By clicking on the Get Started button, he goes to the My Access page and can now see all the resources to which he has access to. For example, the SharePoint site. Alex can now use this resource to start collaborating with Contoso. So this is how you leverage entitlement management to collaborate with external organizations in an easy and secure manner. Thank you.
One of the most frequent questions I get from customers is about the guest access controls we have in place internally within Microsoft. Microsoft is a large tenant, and we rely heavily on external collaboration to work with tons of partners and customers like yourselves. Within Microsoft, the guest access capability is enabled at the tenant level, and all full-time employees can invite guests. We also deploy a simple but comprehensive terms of use for all incoming guests to set and manage the expectations between employees and external partners. The other feature to highlight here is the guest access reviews we covered just a few minutes back. This is a popular and heavily used feature within Microsoft and is used for automating guest lifecycle management. We see similar trends across the organizations in our customer base. We hope this provides you with a glimpse into how the other organizations are managing guest access and helps you define your own philosophy on external collaboration. As a next step, we would like you to create your own organizational plan for external collaboration. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions.
Thanks for watching the video. Bye.